The first B patch of set 15 is live and TFT flow has been updated. The major three compositions of the launch patch, Soul Fighter, Star Guardian, and Mentor Mech, all of them got hit by the B patch. All of them are weaker. The big thing to note is that they're all viable compositions, but the problem is that they are overrepresented and overcontested in the meta. And if you can't hit, obviously it's not going to stabilize as well on 1-stars anymore. As we see the pick rate of these compositions go down, I would expect to see the average placement go up by a decent amount. Although I will note that Soul Fighter definitely feels like it is noticeably weaker than it was before. The big winner for this patch is 7 Crystal Gambit. This went from a 5.3 average to a 3.3 average. It is gated behind Crystal Gambit. It has an insane win rate. We'll talk about this later on when I go into covering this particular comp. But yeah, this was a major flip-flop. They might even have to C-patch this composition just because of how snowbally it is. But again, it does require that Crystal Gambit emblem, so you're not always going to be able to see this. It is not forcible, but it is something to be mindful of. Kale Juggernaut is also doing better on the patch just because they nerfed everything else and Kale was already doing quite well. So Kale is doing reasonably well on this particular B patch. The crew is kind of in a similar spot where it was doing reasonably in the launch patch, but it was overshadowed by those other compositions that got nerfed. Same thing with Prodigies here. I think Star Guardians are still quite good. I need to switch this over to AP because I think this Rising Chaos Syndra opener with Star Guardian is completely broken. It can tempo quite well with this. And then you can switch over to Ari if you get a power up like Mage on her, or if you get Ari2 early enough, but Syndra 2 can carry you so long if you have a good Star Guardian opener. This comp doesn't win that frequently, but it does still have really good tempo. Katarina reroll is kind of on the edge here. I'm not sure if it's A tier or not. It's like right on the line between A tier and B tier after the nerfs that were made to it. I still think overall it's a strong composition. I'm just not quite sure that it's A tier. We have this new all-out Cassante composition that has been dominating, or a lot of people have been playing it more. I don't know if I would say it's dominating as of right now. There's a lot of optimizations that can be made with this when it comes to positioning, which I will talk about a little bit later on in the video. Mentor Mech definitely noticeably weaker after the nerfs that they made to Yone, as well as the nerfs that they made to Rise and the Udyr mentor bonus, or not the mentor bonus, but his ability. Soul Fighter, much weaker, I feel like, with the 8 Soul Fighter nerfs. You might even want to play 6 Soul Fighter now if you don't have the emblem, but I do think, generally speaking, Soul Fighter wants to be played from emblem much more than it was before. Legendary Mech Flex, if you don't have a ton of gold and can 2-star all of these units, like this board will still win in a lot of lobbies if you're able to hit the board. The problem is that hitting the board can be quite difficult. There is this relatively new composition. It was played on PBE, but it's getting played a lot more after the buffs that they made to Karma in the B patch, which is Sorcerer Karma, that uses the crossover between Mighty Mech and Sorcerers, which we'll talk about later on. Duelist still kind of in the same spot, even with the nerfs to GP. He's still relatively solid overall. And then they also buffed Kog'Maw in the B patch, and he's still kind of an artifact check, but at least he's playable now if you have one of those artifacts. All right, next up, we have the tier list for the B patch. I'm not going to go over every single one of these conditions, but I did want to show it real quickly so you can pause the video if you want to look at it, or obviously you can come over to the website and check it out live. But the big thing is Flicker Blade into Crystal Gambit is quite good. The HP augments into Crystal Gambit may be good. I say maybe because Crystal Gambit is just so unbelievably broken right now. You might not even need the really big cash outs in order to win out. Build-A-Bud into Kale is obviously quite good. Manazane, Yumi, Blighting Jewel, Malzahar, and the Prodigies comp is quite good. Lots of good artifacts and items and too much value in Katarina reroll. Lots of different really solid options for Kale with Zanya's, Radiant Ginsu's, Flicker Blade, Prep, Worth the Wait Kale, Radiant Refactor to get that Radiant Ginsu's. Lots of different good options for the crew as well, because you got like Shimmer Scale Essence. Any of the item augments are really good. Treasure Hunt is really good. Space Camp makes it more likely you get your first 3-star. You still have your range extension on Gwen, and Gangplank that can be quite solid, especially if you're able to get something like Stretchy Arms with this. And then obviously all of your artifacts on Knuckle Duster's Vi are quite good. In fact, in general, the Knuckle Duster's hero augment is just kind of broken right now. So lots of solid options right now in the meta overall. And you should be aware of as many of these conditions as you can, because being aware of them and knowing what to pick in game is going to give you a massive advantage. All right, let's start by talking about one of the most overbuffed compositions in quite some time, 7 Crystal Gambit. This went from averaging a 5.3 all the way down to a 3.3 with over a 40 or 50% win rate with people who know what they're doing. The catch is it requires Crystal Gambit Emblem, and the reason it requires it is you can't play 7 Crystal Gambits without it, and they made a major buff to 7 Crystal Gambit where it went from 300 HP to 500 HP, and they went from 25% damage amp to 35% damage amp. But the other really big buff is they increased the cash outs for 5 Crystal Gambit, which of course you can play that without an emblem. So why is it not playable without one? It's because 5 Crystal Gambit does not give your team any combat power at all. And so it's unlikely you're going to be able to win rounds to get those kill cash outs. But with 7 Crystal Gambit, you have enough combat power to actually kill units, win rounds, and then you snowball with the cash outs from 5 Crystal Gambits and you win 40-50% of the time. It's completely absurd. There are 4 different ways that you can get Crystal Gambit Emblem. The first is you can get it from Trainer Golem. The second is from Augment. The third is making it if you're able to get a spatula from the first carousel. And the fourth way, which is kind of interesting, is you can actually get it from one of the Crystal Gambit cash outs. And the way you would do this is you would field 3 Crystal Gambit on 2-1, 2-2, or 2-3. You're going to win a mixture of the next 4 rounds, and then you're going to double down and lose 4 times. Most of the time, that's going to give you a 210 cash out. There is a chance that you get a 250 cash out instead. That's if you get 8 loss. So if you lose 4 times and then double down once and lose another 4 times, you're probably going to get the 250 cash out. And if you kill too many units, I also believe that will give you the 250 cash out. So be mindful of that because the 210 cash out has a 33% chance of spatula plus component anvil, which means you're very likely to be able to make Crystal Gambit Emblem, and then you can commit to this line. And if you miss, the other 2 cash outs that you can get is an artifact anvil and some gold and 4 cost, which you can then use to play some other meta fast 8 composition. So in my opinion, that's how you would play Crystal Gambit normally anyway, even if it wasn't broken. But now you also have the option of playing into this line if you're able to hit the spatula, which is quite good. I think we're going to see a lot of players angle that particular option and try to get that 210 cash out to see if they can play into this line, even if they weren't able to get Crystal Gambit in one of the first 3 ways that I mentioned. Another way you can play this comp that I'm not entirely sure is possible right now because they've made so many changes to the amount of gems that you get and the multipliers is this double down twice strategy. This double down twice strategy works really well if you can get the 500 cash out. It works less well if you get the 600 or the 400. So take what I'm about to say with a grain of salt. I could not find any games of people double downing twice like I was able to on the PBE. So I don't know 100% for sure that you'll get the 500 cash out with this approach. But if you do, the way you would want to play this is you field 3 Crystal Gambit on 2-1. You're trying to get 2 wins or more, and then you're going to double down twice. It's going to leave you at 1 life on 4-3, and you're going to get the 500 cash out, which has 3 distinct cash outs. You have 100 gold, Zyra 2 Crystal Gambit Emblem, Mana Zane, and Tactician's Crown. This one's completely broken. And then the other one is it can give you every single class emblem in the game. Now, the thing is, you have to do your roll down and level up to level 8 and roll down on 4-2 instead of 4-3, because if you try to do everything on 4-3 with 30 seconds on the clock, it is completely impossible. It is worth losing the 5 gold to do your roll down on 4-2. You're basically spending 5 gold of interest in order to get 45 seconds more on the clock by transitioning over the course of 2 turns. You still have to lose 4-2, so remember that. You might have to item remover your Ash, for example, but make sure that if you use this approach where you double down twice, that you are doing a transition on 4-2 and 4-3, not just on 4-3, unless you think you are an APM god and you can do that transition in 1 turn. Especially with this cash out in particular, because with the emblem cash out, it is very good, but you're trying to get to a board like this, which is quite difficult to do if you're doing it on a very short time frame. So I just wanted to mention that real quickly here. Make sure that you're starting to do your transition on 4-2 and not on 4-3 if you're going for that double down twice approach. The other way that you can do this is you can play for win streak if the lobby is weak, for example, and you could play 5 crystal in stage 3 if you're able to hit the 4 Crystal Gambit units with Janna, Syndra, Swain, and Vi. And this can be quite good because the cash outs are really strong. So if you have a strong board and you're able to just win some rounds with this and 5 crystal, that can be really powerful as well. But yeah, in general, this 7 Crystal Gambit comp is not normal right now. They're probably going to end up C-patching it or something. I don't know. Maybe they leave it in the game because it's gated behind Crystal Gambit Emblem, so maybe it's not a higher priority for them. But I do think if people start optimizing for that 210 cash out, you might find that it's not that uncommon to be able to get this Crystal Gambit Emblem. So we'll see what happens with this, but I think it's a very interesting thing to watch out for. All right, here's another comp that's really gained in a lot of popularity over the last 24 hours or so, and that's All Out Cassante. There are two main variations for this comp that I've seen. You have the 4 Strategist variation, and then you also have the 4 Protector version. I personally think that the Strategist version is better, but I don't think it's solved as of right now because there's not a very high sample size for this comp at this exact moment. You're generally going to be duo carrying Cassante and Akali, and you need to get the All Out fruit or power up onto Cassante. And the only way to really increase your probability of being able to hit this is you want to use the fruit on a unit similar to Cassante first. So for example, Leona right now is the most similar to Cassante right now. She has the most crossover in terms of the different power-ups that she has available. And the reason you do this is you're going to use it on Leona. You're going to pick any fruit. It doesn't really matter, any of the power-ups. And then you're going to sell her, and then you're going to use it on Cassante. And the reason you do this is because you can't roll the same power-ups twice in a row. And Leona obviously can't get All Out because it's unique to Cassante. So by using it on a unit that is similar to Cassante, that can get similar power-ups first, you're ruling them out of the pool and increasing your probability that you're able to hit All Out. That mechanic might change in the future, but it's currently the way it works in the first patch of the set. So it is definitely worth doing, especially where you need this particular power-up on Cassante. You're going to build Edge of Night on him, Infinity Edge, and then pair that with something like a Hodge, Sterix, or Striker's Flail. I actually think the Striker's Flail build is the best one as of right now, so I'll probably switch that later on. The other way you can build this is you actually play a Supreme Cell on him and then play 4 Supreme Cell, and the board would look something like this. And the last thing I really want to highlight here is the positioning. So with the positioning, you want to fill up your front line. I think it's very good to have even your ranged units in the front line, especially Ziggs, maybe not Janna, but if you put your strategists in the front line, they get massive shields. And the really important thing is that they block your entire front line like this. And by blocking your entire front line and putting Cassante in the 3rd row, number one, by putting him in the 3rd row, he gets damage amp from Strategist, which is quite good. And then also his All Out power up will cause him to animation stall at the start of the fight. And then he dashes to the enemy. And when he dashes to the enemy, it's very likely that your board will wrap around the enemy's board because you have so many frontline units, and they might actually block Cassante's path and he goes straight into the backline. That's the goal, at least in particular, with this positioning. And you can do it on either side. Another thing that's important to note about the positioning is you really want your Zac to die as soon as possible. In fact, I don't think you want to upgrade to Zac 2 in this comp, although I don't think that's been optimized yet in terms of what is correct. But you want your Zac to die sooner rather than later so that Wraith will heal Cassante. I believe that that's how that works. There's been a lot of labbing with this one in particular, so there's a lot of optimizations that you can make. I don't know exactly how strong the comp is as of right now. For example, I know TFT Academy has it in S tier. I don't know if it's quite S tier, but I do see people hard forcing it all the time. So it might be an A tier. It is a really interesting comp nonetheless. There's a lot of optimizations that can be made with positioning. The other thing I want to mention here is with Akali. I think Hemorrhage is really broken on her. I think it really drastically increases the probability that she's going to be able to kill the backline. And then for your 3rd unit that you can itemize, I think it's generally going to want to be Jarvan or Zyra. So I might change it off of Ryze here. I don't think most of the time you're going to want to itemize your Ryze, but if you have a lot of items, you can consider it. I do think that econ augments are pretty good with this comp. You really do want to be able to hit that Cassante, Akali, and Jarvan, and it's quite difficult to do just because of how many 4 costs are on this board. It is actually a surprisingly expensive board, despite the fact that it doesn't really have any 5 costs. You can also play Twisted Fate over this Zyra instead if you want to. And yeah, generally speaking, this is an interesting comp. We are still discovering more about it every single day. Another comp that is gaining popularity in the B patch is Sorcerer Karma. It still has a relatively low pick rate overall, so we don't really know exactly how good it is. But the concept is quite simple, where you play Sorcerers, you play Mighty Mech because the crossover between them is quite good. You play Ryze on your board, which gives you a nice mentor bonus and also gives you Strategists. The board just generally fits quite nicely, and then you're looking to just itemize your Karma here. There are some good artifacts for the composition. Obviously, Snipers on Gwen is quite good. Also, Mana Zane on Karma or Blighting Jewel on on Karma can be quite good. And then also if you get something like Ludens, you could play that on Ari. And I think if you pair this with something like Magic Expert in this comp, where you give a ton of AP to the Ari with Ludens, I think that could be pretty impressive. But in that case, you probably want to play Reroll instead, because I think RE2 is no longer the monster that she was before. So yeah, if you get Ludens, you might want to just angle towards Ari Reroll with Sorcerers instead, which is pretty much the exact same composition. You just play it as a 3-cost reroll with Swain and Ari instead. Speaking of Swain, according to the stats right now, it actually looks like it's better to itemize Jarvan as your tank rather than Swain, which I thought was quite interesting. And then I also think you want to put your power up on Karma and Gwen. Hemorrhage has just been the best power up on Gwen generally speaking, so I think it's probably still the best here in this comp. And then for Karma, I think Mage is quite good, Shadow Clone efficient. Shadow Clone's always just good. I have that rated here pretty much regardless. Any unit that can use this, it's probably good on, and then efficient is also quite solid. All right, that covers the major changes for the B patch. This is not going to be a comprehensive guide to the entire patch because I just did that 2 days ago, but I do want to talk about some optimizations that have been discovered. The first one for Kale Juggernaut reroll, I think it is actually better to go for Aatrox than it is to go for Zac, and I think there's 2 reasons for this. One, I think Aatrox might just be a better tank with 6 Juggernaut, and number 2, it's not even really that bad for your Zac to die because it guarantees that all of the Wraith healing goes onto your Kale. And what made me realize this is the Cassante comp, where you want your Zac to die first so that Cassante will heal himself. I think it's kind of similar here because there's a lot of backline chip damage in this particular set. So guaranteeing that Kale will heal herself with her trait makes it a lot less likely that she just dies to random stuff. And I think that's actually quite valuable. Some other things here, prodigies are quite good. I added this particular augment here, unlimited power. You can use the death cap, you can use Morello, and you can use Rod really well. So I think this particular augment might be one of the best augments for this particular line. Also, the anomalies have been, I think, solved a little bit more for this. I don't know if I had this, but I think Classy is quite good with 5 Prodigy, Super Genius, and Bullet Hell. All of these are really good options for Yuumi. And then with the Leona, I think you don't really want to go for something like Star Student. Generally speaking, you're looking for better power-ups than the Battle Academia power-ups. Then also with the Kog'Maw composition, this wasn't really playable before the B patch. Now it's more playable. The big thing with this is I still believe it's an artifact check and mostly, honestly, Flicker Blade. I've seen it played from Static Shiv. It did not look that broken with Static Shiv. And then I also don't think Dawncore is that broken either. So it's mostly Flicker Blade that this is going to be OP from. And by OP, I really just mean solid. So that's worth noting that now Kog'Maw is playable again. But again, I don't actually think it's all that broken. And that's mainly it for the B patch. There were a lot of changes that they made, but overall the meta is somewhat similar except for the changes that I mentioned. And some of those would have happened anyway. For example, this Cassante comp, this was already gaining popularity before the B patch. So hopefully this helps you with your climb, and good luck.